An old man, a broken bike, a biker bar full of laughter. They mocked him, they filmed him, he said nothing. Then the door opened, and the man they called Bear stepped out. What happened next? No one, not even the old Marine, was ready for it. Welcome to NT, where everyday kindness becomes unforgettable. Let's begin this journey together. At exactly 8:05 every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning, a lean figure on a worn-out bicycle would ease onto Main Street in Ashford, Montana. No one ever needed to ask who it was. It was Walter Grady, the quiet man in the faded army green jacket and beat-up baseball cap that hadn't seen a washing machine in years. Walter wasn't the type to talk much. Folks at Mason's Market knew his routine by heart. Oatmeal, canned beans, instant coffee, and occasionally a small bag of peanut brittle if his knees weren't aching too badly. He'd never ask for help, never complain about prices, and always counted exact change with a pair of fingers that shook just enough to remind you he'd seen more than he ever said. 3 years ago, after a series of mild strokes left him with unsteady hands and blurred vision, Walter gave up his driver's license. The DMV didn't really leave it up for discussion. Too risky, the young clerk had said, not unkindly. So Walter adapted. He pulled his old Schwinn out of storage, oiled the chain, and decided that as long as he could balance 2 wheels beneath him, he'd stay independent. There was something almost meditative about watching him pedal. Slow, steady, always upright. Neighbors would wave. Walter would nod. No words. Just a silent rhythm between an aging man and the town that had half forgotten his name, but never questioned his presence. He didn't need a parade. He needed groceries and peace and air. He wasn't trying to make a statement, but he did just by showing up. That Thursday afternoon in early June had started just like the others. The sky over Ashford was brushed with soft cotton clouds, the kind that made you squint and smile at the same time. Walter had loaded his groceries into the front basket of his Schwinn and balanced the rest across 2 worn panniers strapped to the rear rack, carefully, methodically, like a man who'd done this dance 100 times. He was about halfway home, pedaling past the edge of the old lumber yard where the road curved slightly, when he heard it, a faint metallic ting, followed by a short, dragging clink. He knew that sound. It was the kind that didn't get better with time. Walter eased the brakes, hoping to glide to a safe stop, but the chain didn't wait. It snapped clean off, whipping the frame and jamming the rear wheel. The bike lurched, the basket tilted, and Walter managed to steady himself only just in time to avoid going down hard. When he looked up, his stomach tightened. He was right in front of Iron Ridge Saloon. Of all the places in Ashford for a breakdown, this was the worst. The building itself was a squat, red brick holdover from the town's rougher days, but it was the crowd that made folks cross the street before passing by. Dozens of motorcycles lined the parking lot, each one gleaming like it had something to prove. On the outdoor patio, half the town's toughest-looking bikers sat under metal umbrellas, laughing loud, drinking louder. Walter didn't make eye contact. He bent down, inspecting the snapped chain like it was just another Tuesday. But the silence behind him was shifting. Someone had noticed. The laughter started small. A few chuckles, one loud whoop, and then a sarcastic whistle. "That bike's seen more action than him," someone jeered, followed by the sound of a beer bottle hitting wood. Walter didn't flinch. He stayed crouched beside his bike, squinting at the chain like it was the only thing that mattered. But deep inside he could feel it. The shift in air, the ripple of attention. Then everything stopped. Not gradually, instantly, like a switch flipped in the room. The music from the saloon cut mid-beat. Conversations halted mid-word. Even the clink of a pool cue came to a halt. From the shadowed doorway of the Iron Ridge Saloon, a figure stepped out, broad, solid, towering over most men like a mountain might over a field. Raymond Bear McKinney, the president of the Iron Ridge Riders Motorcycle Club. Legend had it he once ended a bar fight with nothing but his belt buckle and a glare. His arms were sleeved in faded ink. One side told the story of a Harley, the other told stories he never talked about. Dog tags, folded flags, dates etched in fire and ash. He didn't say a word at first, just looked. His eyes moved from Walter, kneeling beside the scattered groceries and busted bike, to the group of men and women still frozen in awkward postures, phones half raised, beers mid-sip. No one dared move. Even the breeze seemed to hush. Bear's boots crunched across the gravel. Slow, intentional. He stopped a few feet from Walter, then bent down and lifted the bicycle in one smooth motion. His fingers, thick like tree limbs, turned the pedal gently, inspecting the snapped chain. Then he spoke, his voice low but firm. "You coming?" Walter blinked. "Sir?" Bear nodded toward the saloon door. "Let's get this fixed." Walter hesitated at the threshold of Iron Ridge Saloon. He hadn't been inside a bar in nearly 2 decades. Didn't drink anymore, not since the night terrors came back with age. But there he was, clutching his groceries, trailing behind a man called Bear into the lion's den. The inside was dim, but not unfriendly. Wooden beams overhead, pool tables scratched by time, and walls lined with dusty memorabilia. Most of the bikers had followed them in, like uncertain students walking behind a strict teacher. Bear walked straight to the biggest pool table and, with one clean sweep of his arm, sent the billiard balls scattering into pockets. A few gasps echoed, but no one protested. He set Walter's broken bicycle gently on top of the felt and turned to the room. "All right," he said. "Anyone here got tools? And an ounce of respect? Get over here now." It wasn't a request. It was a challenge. For a moment, nothing moved. Then one hand went up from the back. An older man with a gray ponytail. "Got a wrench kit in my saddlebags." Another spoke up. "I've got a spare chain. Might fit." A young woman stepped forward, eyes steady. "My dad had a Schwinn. I can help with the brake tension." One by one, they came, not as mockers, not even as bikers, but as people. Walter stood a few feet back, unsure if he should step in or disappear. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and certainly not like this. His instincts told him to be cautious, but another part of him, the part that remembered carrying wounded soldiers across rice paddies under fire, told him this wasn't danger. This was redemption. It wasn't the tools or the steady hands that caught Walter off guard. It was the silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that settles when something sacred is happening. Around the pool table, a dozen bikers were now leaning over his battered bicycle, discussing cables, links, brake pads, like a pit crew working not for glory, but for something deeper. Walter stayed back, unsure of what to do with his hands. He folded them behind his back, then crossed them in front. Then finally let them rest at his sides. That's when Bear turned toward him. The big man didn't speak. He simply stepped forward, reached out slowly, palms up, like a medic, and gently touched the edge of Walter's collar. Walter froze for a second. Instinct. You don't grow up in the military without flinching when someone reaches for your chest. But Bear wasn't aggressive. He was reverent. He pulled out the chain tucked beneath Walter's shirt. 2 weathered dog tags clinked against each other, dull from age, but still legible. Bear held them in his palm, his brow furrowed. "Walter Grady, serial number 25,941,367, blood type O negative, no religious preference." A hush fell over the bar. Bear turned the tags over, rubbed his thumb across the back. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, Vietnam, 69 to 71. He didn't ask if it was true. He didn't need to. From the side of the room, a voice, tentative but clear, broke the quiet. "Grady? My dad used to talk about a Sergeant Grady at Quezon." A young man stepped forward, beard neatly trimmed, arms crossed but trembling. "My name's Logan Whitaker. My dad's Samuel Whitaker. He always said he only made it out because someone carried him to the evac point when he was hit. Was that you?" Walter looked at him, blinked, then nodded once. "That was a rough day," he said softly. "Your father was a brave kid." Logan swallowed hard. "You saved his life." After the silence lifted, it was like a switch had flipped inside the Iron Ridge Saloon. No more smirks, no more half-raised phones. Just sleeves rolled up and voices lowered into quiet focus. Bear stepped back, handed the dog tags gently to Walter, and said only, "Let's do it right." And they did. One man unrolled a weathered canvas toolkit like it was a sacred ritual. Another popped open a saddlebag and pulled out a pair of gleaming brake levers. A younger biker with an eyebrow ring crouched low, spinning the rear wheels slowly, calling out measurements like he was working on a Harley engine. Someone even brought out a pressure washer from the maintenance closet. With surprising care, they cleaned the frame, lifting off years of rust and dirt. It didn't make the bike new, but it made it feel remembered. Across the table, Logan Whitaker carefully adjusted the new chain, glancing every so often at Walter, as if checking in with history itself. "My dad would have loved to see this," he murmured. Walter stood off to the side, arms folded across his chest, not to keep people away, but maybe to keep the emotions in. He hadn't expected any of this. Not the recognition, not the repairs, and definitely not the respect. But it was happening, and it was real. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't the one holding others up. Others were stepping forward for him. No speeches, no medals, just tools, grease, and steady hands that said, "You matter." Sometimes brotherhood doesn't wear the same patch or ride the same machine. Sometimes it's just about who shows up when something's broken and stays until it's whole again. The bicycle gleamed now, clean, sturdy, and somehow proud. New tires, smooth brakes, and a polished Marine Corps emblem mounted just above the front wheel. Someone had even wrapped the handlebar grips with leather strips, dark brown, weathered, just like the ones you'd find on a vintage cruiser. Walter reached out and ran his hand along the frame. "Didn't think I'd ever see her look this good again," he said softly. But the surprise wasn't over. Bear disappeared for a moment into the back office. The saloon fell quiet again, not out of fear this time, but something close to reverence. When he returned, he held something folded carefully in both hands. A vest. Leather. Jet black. The same kind the Iron Ridge riders wore. But this one was different. Bear stepped up to Walter and unfolded the vest gently. Across the back was the club's emblem, a roaring engine wrapped in flame. But above it, instead of a nickname or rank, there was just one word. Respect. Embroidered in bold silver thread. "We don't hand these out," Bear said, his voice graveled but steady. "We earned them. And every man here knows. Today, you've reminded us what that word really means." He helped Walter slip it on. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't for show, but it fit like it had waited all these years to find the right shoulders. Walter didn't speak. Didn't need to. His hand brushed the stitched word on his back. The same hand that once held a rifle in the jungle now trembled, not from age, but from the weight of being seen finally for who he truly was. The next morning, just after sunrise, Walter climbed onto his refurbished bike and headed toward Mason's Market. Same road, same rhythm, but something was different now. As he passed Iron Ridge Saloon, he noticed a small work crew gathered near the front door. A brass plaque, no larger than a clipboard, was being carefully fastened into the red brick wall. Walter slowed but didn't stop. He didn't need to. That afternoon, after the errands were done and the sun hung low over Ashford's hills, Walter returned along the same path. This time, the plaque was in place. Simple, direct. Here, respect is earned and remembered. Word spread fast. The bikers didn't post it online. There were no selfies, no press releases, but everyone in town started noticing the change. Every time Walter rode by, the roar of engines softened. Helmets came off. Men and women who once rolled their eyes now stood at quiet attention. Not because they had to, but because something inside them told them it was right. They never spoke of it like a tradition, but that's what it became. And so every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, when the old Marine pedaled past Iron Ridge with his groceries and his quiet pride, the world paused, just for a moment. Not to honor a man who wanted attention, but to salute a life lived with quiet courage. Walter never asked for any of it. He just kept riding. And that, perhaps, is why the town remembered him, not for what he said, but for how he showed up every time, without fail. There are moments in life that don't need applause or medals, just a look, a quiet action that says, "I see you, I respect you." Walter Grady's story isn't just about war. It's about the strength it takes to live after the war. It's about how one man, simply by showing up with dignity, changed an entire community. If this story moved you, leave a comment with the word respect to let us know you're someone who still believes in honor. Feel free to share this story with a friend, someone who needs to be reminded that kindness and recognition still exist in this world. And don't forget to subscribe to NT Amazing Stories for more powerful, human-centered stories that inspire, surprise, and stay with you long after they end. Because sometimes it's the quietest stories that echo the loudest.